Hello, this Excel video tip is going to be continuing our conversation on Excel macros and VBA. And in this edition, we're going to be talking about the VBA window and Visual Basic and some of the basics on what you need to do to have that set up. So just to make sure, at this point, you should have watched the introduction to macros video, and you want to make sure that the developer tab is turned on your ribbon. And again, to do that, you would just come into File, Options, Customize the ribbon, and make sure that this little check mark is selected next to the developer ribbon. So the first thing I want to show you is on the developer ribbon, you'll notice that there's a Visual Basic button. And if you click that, what you'll see comes up is the Visual Basic for Applications window. Now, another way to get into this, if you're in Excel, if you don't want to have to come up and click this window, is if you hold down the Alt key and hit F11, that will take you directly to the VBA page. Now there's a couple things that you'll notice in here. This is the project window, and this is all the files that are currently working or maybe in the background within Microsoft Excel. And I'm going to be toggling back and forth between windows here. So if you'll notice in Excel, I'm in Book 2. That's the name of my file. So in the project window within Visual Basic, you'll notice that there will be where it says VBA Project Book 2. So this is the file that I'm working with. Now, in our previous example, we recorded a macro, and I'm going to go ahead and record something that's just really basic here, because that's going to kind of show us what some of the elements to the code within Visual Basic is. So I'm going to record my macro, and I'm just going to call this test macro, and I'm going to just type in and I'm just typing words in here for just to get an idea of what might happen. Okay, now I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm now going to go back into the VBA window. That's holding by holding Alt F11, and you'll notice now under VBA project there's a line where it says Module 1. All of your VBA is kept within modules. So if I double click on Module 1, you'll see now it comes up where it says sub test macro, and it's got a whole bunch of coding language here. This is basically the guts, if you will, behind the macro that we just recorded. Now there's some things that you'll notice about every macro. A macro will always start with sub, and that stands for subroutine. So this is saying I'm going to start a subroutine, and I'm going to call it test macro, and then an open and close parentheses. And then everything in between here will be what the macro is. And then when you're done with the macro, you would just say end sub. So this is the beginning. So sub, name of the macro, open and close parentheses. And then for the end, it would just be end sub. And anything in between those two would be what the macro contains. Now, if you remember, what I did is I just typed some words within cells. And if we look, what it put is it said active cell dot formula R1C1 equals ACE. And basically what that says is in whatever cell you're in, or the active cell, we're going to set the formula to ACE. So basically it's setting the value of whatever the current cell is to ACE. And then we selected cell A2, made that deuce, and so forth. This just kind of gives us an idea of what can be in here. Now, if I wanted to change this macro a little bit, I'm just going to delete some of this. And I want it to say active cell equals, and I'm going to change what's in the quotation marks to Alan is the coolest. Again, I'm not that narcissistic, but somebody's got to be the coolest, so I guess it'll be me today. Just kidding. Okay, so now I've changed the macro, and it's going to be whatever cell I'm in, I'm going to have that say Alan is the coolest, and then I'm going to select cell A2, and I called that test macro. So now I'm going to change back to my Excel sheet, and I'm going to delete everything that was in there, so we're starting fresh. If I want to look at what macros I have in here, I click the macro button, and now you'll see it says test macro. And if I hit run, it'll, since I did active cell, whatever cell I'm selected, it'll put that in, and then it's going to select cell A2. So let's try it. And it did. You see it said Alan is the coolest here, and it selected cell A2. If I click here and run that macro again, it's doing exactly what I told it to do. And again, that's the beauty of a macro. It's just going to do that repetitive motion. It's going to do the same thing every time. If I hit Alt F11 to go back to my macro, right now, you'll notice that it's also got some lines up here, and you'll notice that they're a different color. They're green. This is what's called comments. And whenever you start a row with this little tick, the apostrophe, anything to the right of that on that line is going to be what's called commented out. And it won't do anything as far as actions, but it can help you keep track of where you are within a macro, or notes about why you made it, or some background there. Comments can be very beneficial and crucial in some cases as to when you're making a macro. So for this one, that's really what I wanted to accomplish with this video, is an overall give you an exposure to the VBA window, kind of walk you through how you start a macro, how you end a macro, and just a real brief example of how you can start doing some commands within a macro. As we go forward, we'll start exploring what some of those commands are, and being able to really start unlocking the power of macros. So that's today's Excel video tip. Introduction to Macros Part 2. Thanks, and have a great day.